What if a company's most important asset wasn't its stock price, but a promise made nearly 40 years ago? Today, we're going to dig into the story of the Arbor Company, a group that tried to solve one of the toughest puzzles in business. How do you grow a company without losing that personal human touch? This is a story about a promise made, not just to investors, but to entire families across generations.
It's a question, right? Every business has to figure it out. But what happens when your product is actually care and your customers, well, they're our parents, our grandparents? All of a sudden, that question feels a whole lot heavier. Let me show you exactly what I mean with a story that really gets to the heart of it all. Just let that sink in for a second. A quarter century of trust passed down from a mother to her daughter like a family heirloom. That's not just brand loyalty, that is a legacy. This one sentence right here is the key to understanding everything the Arbor Company is about. So how on earth did they do it? Well, it all started by completely breaking the mold. To really get what made Arbor so different, we have to rewind the clock. We've got to go back to a time when senior living was a completely different world. Back then, the whole industry was dominated by this kind of sterile medical model. It was all about white hallways, strict schedules, basically custodial care. But a new idea was starting to bubble up, a social model that put dignity, independence, and a real sense of home first. And it was right in the middle of this shift that a new vision started to take shape. So the company was legally formed in '86, but the operational clock really started ticking in 1988, led by its founder, William Bill Disbrow. Their mission? To create delightful surprises and meaningful moments. Then in 1991, Arbor Terrace Decatur opened its doors, and it became the living, breathing proof that this new social model could actually work. But, their most radical idea wasn't the building itself. It was the business model behind it. Okay, this is where Arbor made its first really huge counterintuitive bet. See, at the time, most senior living companies were basically just landlords. Their success was completely tied to the whims of the real estate market. But Arbor, they chose a totally different path. They decided to focus only on the people and the care that was happening inside the buildings. This is what's known as the pure play model. Think of it this way. You have the PropCo, the property company, usually a big investment firm that owns the physical building. And then you have the OpCo, the operating company. Arbor is the OpCo. By choosing not to own the real estate, they basically shielded themselves from the ups and downs of the market and could pour every ounce of their energy into just one thing, being the absolute best at providing care. And that decision, it shaped everything that came next. Because, let's be real, when your whole business is built on service, the only asset that truly matters is your people. And Arbor knew they had to build a culture that could deliver on that 40-year promise. They call it the Arbor Way. It's a philosophy built on trust, deep connections, and just plain accountability. The whole idea is that you don't just come to Arbor for a paycheck. You come to build a career. And honestly, there's no better example of this than the story of their current president. Meet Judd Harper. He started out as a summer employee around 1997 while he was still in college. This guy didn't just parachute into the C-suite, no way. He spent nearly 3 decades climbing his way up, from community sales to chief operating officer, and finally, he became president in 2015. I mean, when your leader has literally walked in the shoes of your frontline staff, it creates a level of trust and credibility that you just can't fake. And that trust, it's everywhere. You see it in the story of the Smith trio, 2 sisters and their niece who worked at that original Decatur community for almost 30 years. It's validated by award after award from Fortune and Great Place to Work. And it's baked right into their Deep Connections program, where staff are trained to learn the incredible life stories of their residents. Because at the end of the day, you can't truly care for someone you don't truly know. Now, this deep, personal understanding of their residents is what led Arbor to tackle some of the most difficult and frankly often overlooked challenges in senior care. And this is where their philosophy gets turned into some truly groundbreaking innovation. Traditional dementia care often uses a staging model, stage 1, stage 2, and so on, which, when you think about it, is all about decline. It focuses on what a person can no longer do. Arbor saw this as fundamentally wrong. They wanted a model that focused on what abilities remained, not on what had been lost. So they adopted this pretty radical new approach called the GEMS model, developed by dementia expert Teepa. And this is where you see this brilliant shift in perspective. Instead of labeling people by what they've lost, the model reframes their cognitive state using the metaphor of precious gems, because every single one is valuable and unique in its own way.
Just look at this. Someone in a sapphire state is still true blue, mostly independent. But someone in an amber state is caught in time, really focused on sensation. The training teaches everyone, from the nurses all the way to the housekeepers, how to interact with each gem. You don't try to use logic with a diamond. You provide structure. You don't rush an amber. You use a sensory connection. It's all about meeting that person exactly where they are.
This intense focus on dignity led them to take on another challenge, one that really strikes at the very core of our independence. For residents with advanced dementia who lose the motor skills to use a fork and a knife, the industry's go-to solution for ages has been pureed food. And yeah, it's nutritious, but it's also often unidentifiable, unappetizing, and just deeply undignified. Arbor just refused to accept this as the only answer. Their solution was a program called Dining with Dignity, and it is so clever in its simplicity. So check this out. The chef still prepares a beautiful gourmet meal, but then that meal is carefully ground down and reformed using natural binders. It looks and tastes the same, just in this perfect, bite-sized finger food format. The result is just incredible. A resident who couldn't use a fork can now enjoy grilled chicken just by picking it up, reclaiming a piece of their independence. And the results? They were just staggering. The company reported a 30% improvement in nutritional intake for residents in the program. But even more than that, they gave back agency and joy to what should be one of the best parts of anyone's day. So you have this entire foundation, the smart business model, the strong culture, the incredible innovations, and it was all about to face its ultimate test in 2020, a crisis that would threaten the very existence of the entire senior living industry. The COVID-19 pandemic turned senior living communities into fortresses, practically overnight. The stakes could not have been higher, and leadership was tested under just unimaginable pressure, especially around the really tough issue of vaccines. At a time when everyone was terrified of losing employees, Arbor made an incredibly bold call. They became one of the very first major operators to mandate the COVID-19 vaccine for all staff. And as Judd Harper put it, the decision was tough but easy. Tough because the labor market was in total chaos, but easy because protecting their vulnerable residents was simply non-negotiable. So what happened? Did they have this mass exodus of staff? Nope. Only 2% of their entire workforce resigned over the mandate. It was the ultimate validation of their culture. The trust they had spent decades building held firm when it mattered most. So, having weathered the absolute biggest storm in its history, Arbor is now looking to the future. And they're not just rebuilding, they're evolving by bringing in smart technology and getting ready for the next generation of residents. Yeah, the future of care is smart. They're using AI-powered sensors that can actually learn a resident's routine and preemptively detect a risk for a fall. They're putting in voice technology so residents can control their lights or the temperature just by speaking. And all of this is happening while they're building a whole new generation of resort-style communities designed for the discerning baby boomer generation. You know, the story of the Arbor Company is really one of deliberate choices. Choosing service over real estate, culture over churn, and dignity over convenience. It kind of suggests that success, when you measure it in human terms, is the only kind that really lasts. And it leaves all of us with a pretty big question to think about. In our own lives and our own work, what is the legacy of trust we are building, one promise at a time?